Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Hey, welcome back to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. My name is Sean, and normally I would file a complaint right about now on something in our world. But Kyle, I understand you would like to take the lead on a frustrating experience you had recently.
Yes. Today you are going to have to receive the complaining.
Okay.
So I recently went in to get my blood drawn because I have a prescription that has to be renewed every year. So my doctor has to write a new prescription every year, and he has to see my blood work before he can do that. Of course, I waited till the last minute, which, okay, that part's on me.
Totally.
But I make an appointment. I go in on a Monday, and my appointment's at 1:30. I'm rolling in there, and there's a few people standing outside, and they're like, "Hey, are you going to LabCorp?" I'm like, "Yeah," because it's a building with a bunch of other businesses in it.
Right.
And they say, "Oh, their system's down, so they're not taking appointments, or they can't do anything today," basically. So I go in there, and the lady was like, "Oh, sorry, come back at 7 a.m. tomorrow."
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, "Oh my gosh, that's early, but okay, fine. I need to get this done."
Yeah.
So I get there at 7:30. The place is packed. I sign in on the little iPad, and it says come back at 9:30.
Oh.
So I'm like, all right. I left, and I went and got my car washed, and then I came back. I waited for 2 hours, and their system went down again.
Nuh-uh.
So the next day, I woke up at 5:30, and I got there at 6:45, and there was 4 people already there in front of me. So I go in, and as I'm waiting in line to check in at the little iPad machine thing, I realized I left my ID in the car. So I lost my place in line. I wasn't about to be like, "Hey, save my spot."
I would have. Sure.
Anyway, I come back, and I had an appointment for 3 hours later. However, the silver lining, the guy from behind the glass, he saw me, and he's like, "Hey, you've been here the last 2 days, haven't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, yes, I have." So I went inside, and they took me right then. So actually, that was nice.
Sure.
But, so my complaint is, partly it's a bummer that their system went down.
Sure.
But I've been there several times, and their system just is not good. And it's always a pain in that waiting room.
On one side, you think, okay, system, satellite, out of their control. But on the other hand, it's like, maybe you need to upgrade or do some patch. How much of that might be in their control? Well, Kyle, I don't want to take the spotlight off of your frustration. But since we're talking about blood work, can I share one recently?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I'm glad they took care of you in the end. That was nice of the guy to recognize you and to own that. I use Quest out here, Quest Diagnostics, and I had to get some lab work done. I was supposed to get it done in January. Well, I forgot, didn't worry about it. So February, I'm like, oh shoot, I gotta get this done. So I go online to make an appointment because I know that's the way to do it, right? I don't want to wait in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Well, I choose a Monday because I'm off on Mondays, and I get an appointment. And it's kind of like 9 or 10 a.m., mid-morning, because I have to fast before. So I don't want to do it in the middle of the day. Well, I lock in my appointment. I'm all excited just to get an email from I made that appointment like a week and a half, 10 days in advance. I got an email the night before my appointment because that Monday I chose was a holiday and they would have to cancel and reschedule.
They didn't know before then.
So that's exactly what threw my head. I'm like, it's President's Day. It's always President's Day every year. Like, how did your system not recognize that you weren't gonna, like, you can block off Sundays, no problem, but you can't pick and choose holidays? So I was a little frustrated because then I started traveling and I had to wait 3 more weeks to get it done. But they should have known that they were going to be closed that day, right?
Yeah. So, Sean, I think the takeaway here for both of us is get your lab work done right away, when you get it. You just sign up and get it done.
Yep. You never know what's going to go wrong, so get it done.
Well, Sean, we have another awesome interview with a friend, Kendall Davis. She's a patient advocate and engagement strategist specializing in rare disease clinical drug development. We had the opportunity to sit down with Kendall and talk about how industry can and should consult the patient community when creating their drug development plans. Enjoy our conversation with Kendall.
Hey, Kendall Davis, thanks for joining us. We are hanging out together in the same space, sitting, 6 feet from each other, which is rare.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've been teasing Kyle about it for a while.
Yeah.
We've been looking forward to it for a while, but I gotta tell you, I'll make it a confession. I know we are connected, you and I, on social media.
Yeah.
Because I know your name. But I couldn't at all tell you what you do.
Who the heck I am.
Why we're connected outside of rare disease.
Yeah.
So for my sake and our listeners' sake, can you tell us who you are and what's your connection?
Yeah. So my name is Kendall Davis, and I have been kind of working in the rare disease space for 12-ish years now. I honestly am not even sure, Kyle, when you and I met or got connected, but I think we really started working together when I joined PRA Health Sciences, which is a CRO, a contract research organization that actually was based right outside Philly. And we started a rare disease advisory committee and had asked Kyle to join. And I think we've just been friends since then, and I want to say that was in 2018, maybe.
Yeah, and there are people that I met there that were good friends to this day.
Yeah.
So that was a good starting point for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was awesome. So I started really working in rare disease when I worked for Global Genes. So I joined the Global Genes team back in, I think it was 2016, and previously I'd worked in public health and children's hospitals and whatnot, but got really, really invested in the rare disease space and have, not left since. So I currently work for a company called ICON, which is a CRO that bought PRA Health Sciences. So we're a contract research organization, and we work with biotech and pharmaceutical companies that are building clinical trials. And I work specifically in the Center for Rare Disease, and I lead our patient advocacy strategy team. So we work with drug developers who are maybe newer to rare disease or just developing assets in this space. And we try to make sure that they're really building relationships with the patient communities that they're hoping to serve. Yeah.
So how would you describe patient advocacy strategy?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I'll let you know when I can actually can explain it really well. But I would say, when we're talking about drug development, especially in rare disease, and I think this honestly should be the case for any indication, but specifically in rare disease, it is critically important to partner with and involve patients and patient advocacy organizations from the earliest possible time point.
Mhm.
And that can be kind of daunting for some drug developers if they've never worked with patient advocacy organizations, or maybe they're new to rare. And so understanding what even a partnership with the patient community can look like and what it should look like at different time points in the development process is something that we try to help facilitate. So we will work with companies depending on their size and what they've done in rare disease and the type of therapy that they're trying to bring into clinical trials, to kind of help line that up with where the patient community is. So, I mean, as you know, FA is a very, very well-established space. You have an amazing patient community, but that's not the case in all rare diseases. Some organizations are very small, maybe more nascent, and so helping companies understand how they can engage really effectively and appropriately, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to kind of optimize that relationship and build trials that are meaningful and accessible to people, right? Because you can build a clinical trial or have a program that, in a vacuum meets all its endpoints and we're getting the right kind of data. But if we're not building it to be accessible to patients, I mean, you don't really have much of a trial.
It's easy to make something make sense on paper.
Exactly.
But maybe not in real life.
Yeah. And so we're trying to help kind of bridge those things.
What got you into this space?
Well, when I was at Global Genes, I got to work with the Foundation Alliance. And so I got to know a lot of different patient communities. And I just started seeing this really consistent theme of drug development not being done very well. And there were just so many areas of missed opportunity. And a lot of it came down to this kind of not engaging with the patient community early enough or in a way that was really meaningful. And there was just all of this, design elements in clinical research that was just being, in my opinion, done kind of poorly. And I saw kind of an easier fix for it. So I got really interested in drug development. And then I had met Scott Schliebner, who at the time led the Center for Rare Disease at PRA. I met him while I was at Global Genes, and we were both living in Seattle at the time. So we'd meet and he'd tell me about clinical research and I'd talk about the rare community. And he decided he wanted to start a function at a CRO that really focused in on patient advocacy in drug development. And so I joined his team, I think it was like 2018, and built the function there.
Very cool.
So you say CRO. Can you describe what a CRO is?
I can try. So CRO is a contract research organization. So essentially, we are a company that a biotech or pharmaceutical company would hire to run their clinical trials. So we kind of are the functional arm of that. So all of the operationalization of a clinical trial, you can hire CROs to do all different things, but we are a full service CRO. So we essentially will help a company take an asset and a protocol into the clinical development process.
Is that, I assume, standard practice, but a requirement? Or do pharmas have the option of doing it themselves?
Yeah, they can. So there are companies that do clinical trials in-house. There are, like I said, so ICON is an enormous company. We're global. We have a ton of different offerings for companies. So some companies just might want some regulatory support for a clinical trial, or, maybe even just different parts of the process. So it really depends on the size of the company. But yeah, absolutely, companies can do clinical trials in-house.
So you're the patient advocacy part of your CRO, ICON.
Yes.
Is there an example you can give us of something you've done in your work where you're like, all right, I'm hitting my stride. I'm doing what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. And I feel like I'm doing a good job at it.
Yeah. I mean, every day, Kyle. For me, it's really important that ultimately the relationship lives between a patient community and a company, the sponsor company. So my team really exists to facilitate that engagement for as long as the company needs. I mean, we might be talking about a really small biotech company with 6 people that hasn't hired an advocacy person yet. They're not really sure what that's going to look like, and they just need some support engaging really effectively with a community. And so we want to be able to support that. But ultimately, like I said, I mean, we are a third party, and we want that relationship to live between the community and the drug company, because ultimately we want it to be a really long-term partnership. And so we will do everything from very early phase engagement. So again, understanding kind of where a company is and what they're trying to do. And then we want to make sure that they really understand the landscape of what the community is. So again, if you have a number of organizations that exist to support a patient community, we want to help them understand what those organizations are, kind of how they function, the best ways they can collaborate. And then we want to make sure that we're facilitating actual meetings and engagement between the community and the company so that that relationship can begin to be built. And also, we want to provide the support to keep the communication happening. So once we kind of develop a strategic plan and strategy for a company, then we determine what's going to be the best way to, get at some of the stuff that they might want to know. So, we always recommend getting patient insight on a protocol. And so one of the things we love to do with sponsors is protocol review meetings with patient organizations. So it might look like an advisory board where you're actually, not talking only about the current unmet needs and maybe perceptions around clinical research, but actually aspects of the protocol that could be really challenging for the patient community. So we want to make sure that, the people who are making the decisions about what a trial design looks like actually hears from patients how they may or may not be able to participate given the parameters. And how they feel about the endpoints and what they're looking to do. We want clinical research to be meaningful for patients also.
Yeah. So that makes sense to all of us, right? That okay, we're doing all of this drug development to benefit a patient. And that's super logical. Mm-hmm. Is there also some regulations in the FDA that require that? It's not only beneficial to the person, but it's required to a certain extent in the process to listen to a patient.
So there are guidance documents from the FDA. And I mean, in my mind, yes. So that is that means that the FDA wants to see this. We are seeing that a lot more, that there are more guidance around getting patient input into designs. Other regulatory agencies globally also have some of these requirements. The way that they exist right now within the FDA is they are just that, their guidance. So we try to, help companies really understand what this means from a business perspective as well. Because ultimately, if we are getting insight up front and we're building trials that are going to be meaningful and accessible, we have a way better shot of not having to delay clinical trials, amend protocols, things like that, which ultimately impacts how quickly an asset can get through regulatory review and be available to patients.
Can we shift gears a little bit?
Yeah.
I want to know your personal opinion on why the FDA just sets forth some generalities or guidance or suggestions. Why not make it a requirement?
This is a great question. I think my personal opinion is that it would be really hard to regulate some of these things and put firm kind of boundaries or conditions around things that you have to or don't have to do. And And I think drug development is so variable, and there's so many components to it that I think it would just be really challenging to actually execute something that, you could actually follow and measure. I also think there's probably a lot of other reasons that there's guidance.
Yeah,
and
I'm with you. I'm playing devil's advocate now and I know it's not your call, so please don't feel like I'm attacking you. But you just said it's challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, life with the rare disease is challenging.
Yeah.
And really, I asked the question not just with the FDA, but we joked as we came into this little studio here. It's an accessible space, but I can't open the door because I'm in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
So why isn't building? Why aren't there requirements that are in place to get a second, third, or fourth opinion? I'm not saying survey the entire population, but some input on whether or not your ramp is a fair degree of incline or not is probably valuable. Again, I know this isn't Kendall's problem, but I'm just thinking of that in every area of life. Like not just medicine or drug development.
Well, it's infuriating, if I'm being honest. Like in drug development, I mean, I want these things to be required because ultimately it's a guidance. So a company doesn't have to get patient input. They don't have to, engage with organizations. We've had this happen. I've had companies come to me that are starting a pivotal or a phase 3 trial, and they've never engaged with a community. And it's shocking to me that they've gotten this far. I mean, you're happy because I want to see therapies come to market, but then they, get to this point where they have to enroll larger trials, and they're having a really hard time doing that. And it's like, well, I can give you a couple of ideas as to why I think that is right. And so it is hard because ultimately, like, I can build a beautiful strategy for a company, but they don't have to take it. They don't have to take our advice. They don't have to engage if they don't want to. I will say I'm seeing more and more companies actually wanting to, and I do think there are some companies doing a really great job in the rare disease space. But I'm with you. I would love for there to be some more structure and not as many, guidance documents, because ultimately it's a lot of gray area. It's pretty wishy-washy, and you can interpret it however you want. So.
And I feel like we see FDA decisions. The FDA says one thing, and then all of a sudden one day it's like something different, right? And it occurs to me that it's partly because some of this stuff is guidance. It's not hard and fast rules. So some of it depends on who's in the room that day or who's in charge, or, that makes it hard.
Well, and like the interpretation of the guidance too, right? I mean, the way that I read something could be completely different from the way somebody else reads it. And so, I think that there's a lot of room for improvement. I think in rare, we've been saying this for a very long time. And I will say I do believe, and I think we have a pretty solid data set to back us up when we say that engaging early and in a really meaningful way will have a positive impact on a clinical development program. And I mean, at this point, it's kind of the best we can do is, provide companies with our expertise and our recommendations. And if they take them, great. And if not, I mean,
in your opinion, what do you think is an efficient and beneficial way to engage? Is that let's all have a beer together, or what does that look like in a tangible manner?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of answers to this question, and I think it depends kind of where you are in your development program. In an ideal world, prior to a protocol even being finalized, you would have had, you would have started to establish a relationship in a space, gotten feedback, worked with the patient organization's leadership to kind of understand how a community receives information, what kind of educational material might be necessary depending on the type of drug that you're creating, and kind of put a lot of that in place. I think there's still a lot of hesitance for companies to engage really early on because they don't want to set unrealistic expectations. They don't want to, in some cases, make people think that there's a drug that's going to be available that may never manifest,
Sure.
and these are all things that I think are very concerning to companies.
Yeah.
I always push back and say that as long as you are being transparent and open and communicating in an efficient way, I really do believe that communities would rather talk to you and have input. And, if something fails, if a program fails, it fails. But I think they'd rather engage, than not. And so I think it's important for companies to know that you can engage really early on. There are ways to do that. There's a ton of legal and compliance concerns around this. And that's something that our team is really effective at doing. We can help you work through all of that so that you feel really confident in the engagement that you're having. And, to your point about having a beer, I really encourage companies to be present in the community if there are conferences. I think you always have to be careful about how you're interacting and, the types of environment. But I think it is important to be in the community and to understand kind of what individuals are experiencing on a day-to-day if you're thinking about doing something like asking someone to participate in a clinical trial, because you're asking so much of people. And I think the least you can do is at least try to understand how it's going to impact their daily life.
We were talking earlier with our friend Katie about the balance between the science, drug development, the business of rare disease, and then the everyday of the patient and dealing with everything.
Yeah.
And patient advocacy is the connector between those two worlds. How can a company, when they're engaging or doing a trial, or how can they support the everyday of a patient?
So I think it's important to make a little bit of a distinction. I think that companies should support patient organizations and allow patient organizations to have the autonomy to determine and to engage with the community about how they should be best supported, right? So I think that companies should be able to provide support to organizations, but it should ultimately be up to the community and the organizations that support the patient community to determine what kind of support is needed.
Yeah.
I think that is an important distinction. I think that the majority of organizations that I've engaged with have a really good handle on kind of what the needs are in the community. And if they don't, they have a good idea of how to gain some of that insight and build programs that are meant to support those needs. Talking about Katie, I think Team Telomere has done an incredible job at figuring out where the community is, what the needs are, and how they can build support programs around that. I mean, the summit that they had, last summer was incredible, and they had a community side. And one of the things that I thought they did that was just brilliant was they had this, one of my favorite people, Hannah Raj, present a session on how to read a scientific paper. Right? Like how to actually read literature, like a scientific literature and what to look out for. And I thought it was just this really, really great representation of understanding that this is a community that may not have as much of a science literacy in this capacity as some others, and trying to make sure that when they are given this information that is vital to their rare disease, that they understand what they're looking at.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, so kind of back to your point, I think it's really important for companies to support patient organizations.
Right.
But when it comes to a trial, I think the way that they can support the day-to-day is to really understand what that day-to-day looks like and try to build a program that is going to introduce as little burden as possible into that daily life.
Yeah. I was on the Bloodstream podcast, and I forget who one of the guests was, but there were three of us. Anyway, he was talking about they were in a clinical trial, and the company had not built in time during the day to eat food, like to get food. They didn't, like, there was no, and I was like, wait, it makes sense that the first concern should be food and water, right? But there's so many instances of situations like that people just don't think of. Like, you got to put yourselves in the shoes of the person and figure out, like, every single step. Like,
we actually, so that's something that our team offers. And it's something I've done a couple times, and it's really incredible. So whenever we are working with a company that is designing a trial, we will actually offer to do we call it a couple different things, but essentially it's like a day of walkthrough. So what is an actual visit for a patient going to look like? And we always, recommend doing this. Like, I'm always happy to facilitate this and actually go through the day, but we recommend bringing somebody from the community that can quite literally walk through the clinic visit, as a patient is going to point out areas of concern or potential, misstep. And sometimes it is as simple as, oh my gosh, you didn't build in a lunch when you have someone that's going to be here for an 8-hour clinic visit. We've identified other really seemingly simple things like Wi-Fi access. If you have someone coming into a clinic visit for 6 hours, make sure they have a Wi-Fi password. We don't know how much data people have on their phones. And but so we always recommend doing some type of visit or walkthrough like that, just to at least identify areas where you could provide extra resources, maybe change things around or streamline the process. Because again, we're asking so much of people. Like, this is such a simple thing that you can do prior to enrolling patients and then putting them through a really grueling process sometimes.
Stop your whole life for 2-3 days a week at a time, and stay in the hospital and be poked and prodded, and
in clinical trials all obviously look very different, and some, to your point, have like stints of time where you have to be in a clinic or near a clinic site. And so we do try to help companies think through ways that, again, we can just reduce the burden, or at least, like, if we know something is going to be really challenging, what can we provide as a support resource, to just maybe make it a little bit better. And sometimes that's allowing for a care partner to come with them, so they have someone to travel with. Or if you're talking about a clinical trial with kiddos, allow for 2 care partners so that, the parent or caregiver of a child has, doesn't feel like they can leave the room at any point in time. So things like that seem maybe simple to people who are thinking about this all the time, but we don't see built into clinical trials too often.
I think that's one thing I would require.
A
day of walkthroughs.
I
remember one trial I did years ago, and I don't even remember the company, so I don't think I'll share any details that are inappropriate, but this company had secured the help of, I don't know what you might call it, like not a travel agent, but
like a concierge service?
You stay in this lab of sorts, like overnight, like you stay beneath there.
Like a phase 1 unit?
Yeah, thank you. So this phase 1 facility, and they do this all the time. There's 30 or 40 people all doing different trials or protocols. Like, it's a thing. So I'm like, oh, I don't care, I'll do it. And it was, I don't know, 3 or 4 days or whatever. And when I got there, I was doing my check-in paperwork, and the intake folks were like, all right, give us your phone. I'm like, what? Like, yeah, no phones allowed. And I think I was going to be there for a week. Like, it wasn't overnight. It was several days.
You can't call your mom.
I'm like, I don't know where I'm at right now, or I don't know. Nobody ever told me how to give them my phone. You're not getting my phone. You can either make an exception or take me back to the airport. I'm not giving up my phone for a fight, whatever it was. So they scrambled, did a couple things, made a couple phone calls, and it was fine. Like, I was able to keep my phone. But I'm like, where did that come from? Like,
Right.
is this a prison?
And
Like,
that's a big,
no.
I feel like you need to communicate that if that's going to be
Totally.
a
Exactly.
requirement.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how was that not? Yeah. I mean, obviously we're on a podcast, but my jaw dropped when you said that. Good Lord. And, and I say this all the time, but I think as an industry, we're really good at designing trials for the data we need, right?
Yeah.
But not always very good at designing them to actually be like accessible to patients.
Sure.
And so we're really trying. Like I said, I work with a ton of companies that are awesome, that I think are really, trying to do the right thing and build trials in a meaningful way. And we're also really trying to make sure that rare organizations and communities are ready for clinical trials too. And so something our team just started that I'm really excited about is we're offering office hours to patient organizations. So any organization, and we're trying to socialize this a little bit more, but can reach out and they get an hour of our time. And so it would be with one of our advocacy strategists like myself and also a therapeutic expert. So within the Center for Rare Disease, we have a group of therapeutic experts who do a lot more with like the designing of protocols. They can email us ahead of time information that they want to learn about clinical research, and they just basically get to ask us questions for an hour. Anything we can't answer, we follow up with an email, but really hopefully to help organizations feel more prepared to answer questions from the community about clinical trials or just understand the process themselves, because there's a ton of awesome information about just the kind of cadence of a trial, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, but the nitty-gritty of it, which is what ultimately is going to make or break an experience and potentially a program, isn't that well understood. And so we're trying really hard to provide resources back to the community as well, because it is just as important to me that patient communities feel ready for clinical research too, because it's hard for everybody. And I think when we're all working as a team for a common goal, you just have a lot better option for things to actually get through to market and therapies to patients.
Yep. What is one thing you're really proud of, like in your life? And maybe it's not about your job, because it's very clear that you're good at what you do and you've made a huge impact and you will continue to. Is there something in your life outside of that you're really proud of?
I mean, I've been trying to get on this podcast for a couple of years now, Kyle. So I appreciate that. I mean, I feel very fortunate because I really love my career. I love what I get to do professionally, and it has become a huge part of my personal life as well. I don't have a lot of distinction between the two, and so which, for better or worse, has just been, amazing for me. And I really love the rare disease space. And I'm really honestly proud of how far the community has come. Like, I know that I'm supposed to be things I'm proud of me-wise, but it has been really cool to watch the rare disease community evolve over the past decade. And I'm really proud to get to be a part of it and to get to meet people who are genuinely changing lives, right? That's really cool. And I think I get to work for a company that obviously prioritizes patients and people. I mean, there aren't a lot of CROs that have an advocacy strategy function, so that's awesome. But yeah, I mean, I'm proud of everything I get to be a part of, if I'm honest. I'm very grateful. I get to sit on the board of Team Telomere, which I couldn't be more proud of that organization. Holy moly. So yeah, lots of things. I have an awesome kid. He's pretty cool. I'm pretty proud of that. I mean, I made him, so it's probably one. But
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Kendall, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I can't wait to we're not talking about
it. Before he really says goodbye, I do want to throw it out there. You said you've been trying to get on this show for a minute, and I couldn't help but think you've been talking to the wrong host, because I would have had you on years ago. but you never reached out to me. So
I know, apparently I was working the wrong angle, Kyle.
Yeah,
Geez.
yeah.
Well, in Kyle's defense, he
You're
did
in now.
ask quite about a year ago, actually. And so, I guess it's on both of us, but I knew we'd get here eventually.
It worked out. It worked out today,
It
so
did.
we're happy.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I mean, you know how much I love everything that you're doing, and knowing that the community has champions and just people who can, elevate voices in a way that, I can't. So it's amazing that you guys exist and are doing this. And I mean, Kyle, you know how much I love you and how much gratitude I have for you. And Sean, you're gonna wish we hadn't met, because I'm about to be, your new best friend.
Score.
But so I appreciate this so much, you guys.
Thank you, Kendall.
Thanks, Sean.
Well, Kyle, I had a blast chatting with Kendall. Being connected with her for so many years, but never meeting her, that was a lot of fun for me. And one thing that really jumps out at me, especially as I replay the interview, is that whole argument and conundrum we find ourselves in at times, we as a society, right? In our case, we're talking about FDA giving guidance to processes. And I realize in some respects, we wish there was more rules, right? More regulation.
right.
Like we wish
Yeah.
there were standard protocols and so on. But then in so many other areas of life, we don't want the government involved, right? We don't want rules
Right.
and regulations. So it's a, I don't know, a good observation for me to realize that it's not all one way or the other. There has to be a balance. And I imagine that a balance, well, in my experience, is hard to find, right? I'm sure it always will be.
And I think the hardest part sometimes is when it feels like the government, and in this case, the FDA, is like a gatekeeper, right? And so they issue guidance, and you're like, all right, I'm going to follow the rules exactly, but they're not precise because it's guidance. That makes it somewhat of a choice about what to do and how to follow this guidance for companies that are in the space. And I'm grateful that Kendall is there to think really hard and interface with patients and put all of her experience into it to make sure that companies are making the best decisions for them as it relates to interfacing with the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really enjoyed that conversation.
And she seems to be a perfect fit for that role.
Sean, let's move into thank you notes. Both of us are aware of the power of gratitude. We try to show it on a regular basis. So, Sean, who do you have to thank today?
Well, in respect to a couple of interviews we've done, I don't know if Kendall might be on that list, but certainly our last couple, Rivki we did an interview with, and Aaron with Ray of Hope we've done an interview with. I want to say thank you to Effie Parks, who helped bridge the gap there or make the introduction. She's a friend of ours, and we've had her on the show a couple times, and people I'm sure know who Effie is as the host of Once Upon a Gene podcast. But really, she also is the one that helped make a couple of interviews happen while we were both in Philadelphia. So, Effie, thank you for those introductions and for helping move everybody along this journey that we're on. How about you, Kyle?
A couple weeks ago, I said thank you to my Aunt Libby for helping me design the Rat a Taxi t-shirt, as she always does. Well, today my thank you goes out to our t-shirt printer. His name is Larry Phillips. I may have thanked him before on the podcast, but he also designs our jerseys every year, and he's involved with the design of a lot of the different swag items that we do. He really is just available all the time to talk about what should we do and how do we get this done? And he manages all the stuff from design all the way through until it gets shipped to our door. So thank you to Larry Phillips.
Awesome. Larry does do some pretty incredible work.
Thank you, Kendall, for being an awesome friend and an incredible advocate for the FA community. Check out our show notes at twodisableddudes.com for links to some of the stuff that Kendall is involved in. Share and subscribe on all your podcast platforms. We're going to talk again with you next week. Until then, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to stay connected.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player.